Oh, that was the meeting at your
Process of data collection of the evaluation process, Mr. Jim Poche from Poche, Parish and Associates. Okay, so Mr. Poche, you want to get started?
Good. You want to open it up, please?
So, the board had previously contracted with Poche Pruitt to basically perform some consulting services for the school district, more specifically master plan and building facility system evaluation. So, with that said, I'll turn it over to Mr. Poche to get us started.
Okay. Can y'all hear me all right? Can y'all hear me or not? We're okay now? All right. Okay, so we've been working on this for about 6 months. The main contact that we've had for the program was working with Billy. We probably had at least a dozen meetings of 2 or 3 hours where we would visit, obtain information from him subsequent to that, evaluate the information, and continue that process. And about every third meeting, we'd recap with the superintendent to keep her posted on where we're progressing and if we were heading in the direction that she was comfortable with. And I think every time we met, we had a pretty good exchange of information and kept moving in that direction. So this is kind of a culmination of it. What's up on the screen right now is, and there's 2 items that we pulled off because we didn't feel we needed them for the presentation, so there was 14 items up there. The first 3 or 4 items were just to list the data that we had obtained and collected from the system. One of them was the master plan program, which is a 250-page document. Another one was the small projects list that y'all are getting ready to put out that accumulated over the last couple of years, and some information on the portable buildings. And so we've taken that information and excerpts from master plan to give you a brief overview tonight on what's in the document. And if any board members subsequent to that want to visit their particular districts or their particular schools to see what that plan outlines, we're familiar enough now with it to do that, and recently even had some more exchanges with Kyle and Billy both, to where I think we can provide that information to you, and then after we finish, if there's something else you want us to do, that's fine. But that's basically the charge that we have, in addition to reviewing the data in such a fashion that we're looking at it from a perspective that we're used to dealing with our clients, which is maybe a little bit different than what y'all are doing, and to reformat it in a combination of information that allows you to evaluate something on some single sheets of paper instead of having to look at numerous documents to make decisions. So the first 2 things we'll look at on item number 1A and B is going to be a recap on 2 Excel spreadsheets of the 250-page documents, highlighting the most important information. I have an expanded document, these 2 sheets, that's about 50% more than what's on there. I kind of condensed it tonight just to give you a rough idea. The second thing we're going to look at is the thing that was called a facility condition index and a community preference rankings, to show you what the architects and engineers found and how the community fine-tuned what they found into a plan that was adopted for the master plan. The next item, number 3, is to review the budgets and the long-range plan facilities and how many dollars were involved in the overall program, what was originally proposed that wasn't successful, and then some discussion on what y'all are implementing now on sort of a pay-as-you-go plan. The next document for the 5th one is a grouping of the small projects that are coming out, and just a way to look at it so that y'all can maybe understand in a simpler fashion what's being done. The portal buildings, future planning, current planning and facility staffing, assessment strategies, Item number 11 is really interesting. It's the feeder zone set up for the whole system that shows how many students in the different districts, how many schools you have in the districts, and what process they feed through. And number 12 is actually what y'all have been doing and funding yourselves. It's kind of a work in progress with Kyle and Billy and I on giving them a format to present it to where it's easy to understand what you've done in the past 10 years. So, that being said, if we start off with the, and you really can't see it too clear up there on 1A, but it really focuses, it has the same chapters and sections in the, on the two sheets that are referenced in the master plan document. I think Billy has a few copies that are circulating. And if any of y'all want to look at it, besides the general information that's down here, it has a specific information at each school and each district that you can look at. And we can either review some of that with you or with some of the staff, however y'all would prefer to do that after y'all take a look at what's going on. So one of the highlights in here is that one of the intents was every school identified as receiving deferred maintenance, capacity, adequacy, and on a needs-based timeline. And so that's one of the things that maybe needs to be looked at. Basically, it was decided to spend about a little over $1 billion over a 20-year period, was the desired effect to accomplish what the identified need to be done. At the bottom of that page was a recommendation of the Master Plan Committee that it appeared that the staffing maybe needed to be expanded more to be able to deal with the amount of things that need to be accomplished in a plan of that magnitude. So we have a few items that we'll talk about on that a little bit later. Initially, the plan was to identify the most critical needs first, especially general life safety and the basic functions of the school at every site before you moved into a major initiative. That wasn't necessarily a uniform opinion of the architects in the community, and they adopted a blend of that concept. They did target the size of the schools of being, for the elementaries, around 750 plus or minus, for the middle schools around 850, and for the high schools around 1,500. And we'll get the recap sheet to show you what the actual population is at each one of the schools. It's interesting to see if you measure it toward what the ideal size is generally accepted around the country. That's basically, it's intended for y'all to review the rest of it. There is some specific information on planning, how much a square foot for the different types of facilities and so forth for the staff and planners to use as they're undertaking some of the projects. Sheet number 2 is the overall facility condition index, they called it. What we did on this sheet, we brought 3 different reports back into one report that allowed you to look at the facility condition index, which is the rating of the schools in terms of their performance and which schools need work and which schools don't, and identifies a lot of the replacement. And so the facility condition index was done by the planning group, and then the community came in after and modified that ranking somewhat to fit what they felt the needs were to come up with a blended solution that got adopted in the master plan. On the third sheet is the same work, but got more specific in terms of the amount of dollars that they recommended to budget at each one of the facilities to do replacement or significant upgrades or selective maintenance at each one of the campuses. That's where the total budget of right at $1.2 million comes up, and the last 2 columns on that sheet was the roughly $600,000 that was attempted in the first bond issue. The 5th sheet is a recap of the small projects. There's probably 40 or 50 projects all total at the individual schools. what we just did so that you could have a better look at what kind of work was actually involved, and some of these have actually changed in the last couple of months. I think Kyle and the staff reorganized a few things based on some replacements and modifications at some facilities as it relates to roofing and other projects like that. But basically under this scenario, it divided up into 7 architectural projects, about $1 million apiece, a couple of civil engineering projects, electrical projects, and mechanical projects, so that y'all could decide what process you'd want to do for selection and try to match up the applications for the projects with the projects that were being done with qualifications. So we stayed away from the RFQ process. We just identified some projects so that you could come back and try to pair those things up. Item number 7 is a status of where, if you look at the bottom number, the 449 classrooms is where you started off before you went into the wing projects. Right now, it appears the number's right at 367. It appears with the projects that y'all are anticipating doing right now, you might knock off another 100 portable buildings with the new facilities you're looking at. So you might be down to about 50% of the portable buildings you started off with. So you're making a significant move toward it. But I think if it's presented in a simple fashion like this to be able to look at and kind of stays up to date, it gives y'all in the community an idea of where you're really moving toward on your project. So I hadn't even anticipated that 50% of them would be taken care of with the next 3 projects that y'all are working on. And Billy, clue me in if I'm missing something up. We kind of did some of this together. On number 8 is an overall list of the different segments of departments and work that goes on within the school system as it relates to the building facilities. And I'll just run through them real quick because there's a lot of things there. Just the small projects list is at the top of the list. The master plan, along with the master plan, is really important to identify what are you doing in the next year or a couple of years, in the next 5 years, in the next 20 years, and to lay out what you plan to accomplish in that 20-year period in some realistic fashion that fits the budget that you have to be able to accomplish those. So Billy's doing some work right now with the superintendent and a couple of board members on really analyzing the funding of those projects and to see that the funding can stay in line with the building projects that y'all anticipate moving forward with. And again, I don't know that the public is really aware that the process that y'all are using really has some structure to it, and we're just trying to maybe reorganize a little bit different. The portable buildings are the 3rd item, C. Athletic facilities were not addressed at all in the master plan. And so one of the things that y'all might want to consider, I know y'all have done some work with some tracks and so forth, is if you're going to parallel some improvements in athletics over the next 20 years, it really needs to be brought into the picture with the building facilities. The next one is the master plan for educational facilities. So I haven't looked into that much. We just identified this with Kyle and Billy, is what is the educational needs at each one of those categories of schools, the high schools, the middle schools, elementary schools, and special schools, so that the designers have that information when they're going in to design the new facilities, and make sure that there's a good integration of the expectation from the educational side matches the expectation that the architects are looking at putting together in their plans. In addition to that, the master plan for the central office and central services, the administration, federal programs, food service, transportation, maintenance, and operation. All of those have building facilities that have an impact on the cost. And I know y'all are doing some work toward restructuring some of that. That's supposed to be a no-cost or neutral cost item for the school system. The funding mechanisms, and I'll kind of leave those out because Billy's working on that with the superintendent and the staff to establish those. But the idea is to make sure you have an adequate funding mechanism to match the plans that you want to move forward with. Got another column is called the Master Staffing and Consultant Plan. And the things that are addressed are capital improvements, the project management, construction management, energy management, transportation, risk management, environmental. The architects and engineers on staff are consulted with, administration, maintenance, staffing, legal services, and bond attorney. All of these things take physical building facilities that provide space for these people to work to get their jobs done. So it's not just the schools that come into play. And the other one is the master vendor and contract service that y'all work with numerous vendors, some of them that have been here for a long time, and to review that and make certain that you're utilizing those services in the most cost-effective fashion for the school system. The next sheet is the current staffing of the facility and planning department, and to show the responsibility that Mr. Bordelon's got on all of these different sectors of school operations, including doing the capital improvements management and construction management for the things that y'all are building. And our opinion would be, as was the master planning committee, that you really need some additional support in there to help get that done, whether it be as a consultant service or as a staff service to work with Kyle and his staff to make sure when this thing kicks off, because you have all been doing a lot of work already, and y'all have done it with in-house staff for the most part. I'm going to pass on number 10 for a little bit, except that as you get into the assessment of the buildings and start implementing things, you need to upgrade the physical facilities condition, match the educational needs with the facility, prioritize the assessment based on the conditions and needs identified in those first two parts, get a program and a scope of work at each one of the facilities that improves the conditions and the function of them, and then provide preliminary cost estimates and timetables for the short-term, long-term, and intermediate funding, and the funding to accomplish that. Chart number 11 is probably the chart with the most information, and what it basically did was went into each school, identified the student population into each district and grouped them by district, the elementaries into the feeder zones, to the middle schools, and to the high schools, to be able to track what the size of the facilities were compared to the ideal sizes that are recommended by the master plan and generally by the educational system around the country, and to see how those things paired up, where you might have some opportunities to do some things. And it's a sensitive thing to talk about, but if there is a fairly small school that could be upgraded to be a new school at that location and not just displace a school, there's some opportunities for some efficiency to have lesser than the 48 schools you have, and actually still have schools in the same area where the schools are at that are old and undersized for an efficient operations in elementary school. And again, this is just as an observation. It's not anything that anybody has to do, but it's an observation where there might be some potential for cost savings in systems. And, I think Billy has a figure maybe that on what it costs to set up an individual school on its own, of having what was it, annually for one school?
Size of the school, you're looking at anywhere from $450,000 to $750,000 for school administration, and potentially another $400,000 to $500,000 for utilities and building maintenance. So it would put you in the $1 million range.
Mr. Centani?
And looking at these numbers here, I see you have, the goal enrollment targets for each level of school. So it appears, am I reading this correctly, that what you're saying here is perhaps combining schools into building a new one and basically replacing multiple schools with one school to get...
Sure, especially if you happen to have two schools that are undersized and old and need to be replaced anyway, strategically located where those kids are still within their district and in a general feeder zone that enhances the learning ability in a brand new school, in a facility that has more diversity of kids and educators there to provide it. And you can actually follow some of the grading levels that come up from some of those schools. But that's exactly right.
Thank you.
It appears if you look at it overall, you could possibly do something successful and reduce the system by 5 or 6 schools if you decide to go that route. And it's an enhancement would be to put a new school in an area where 2 small schools were that can be paired up. The other thing is to establish a goal of, as you build the new schools, how many students do you build it for? And how do you stage the building of those schools? And maybe even leaving some of those schools in place when you build a new school and slowly transition out of putting it out of commission by building another new school at a future date. So there's a lot of growth areas that are going on, and so it can be a progressive thing to transition out of those over a period of time and allow some things to be done quicker in other areas of the school district if you put some things like that in place. It's a good study guide to look at it. The board members can look at it in their own districts and see how they feel it impacts what they're doing. And that's kind of the reason we kind of did this in a district-wide pattern so the board members could look at it that way. Anybody have any? So I guess an example is if you look at elementary schools overall, they've got from pre-K to the 5th grade, they've got 6 sections of schools. So at the 14,500 kids they have now, there's an average of 606 students. An elementary school ideal size is around 750. You could drop it back down and eliminate 2 schools, just overall looking at the whole number, and still have 661 kids per school as an average, because there's so many schools in the elementary system. And the same things with the other ones. Just to follow the pattern with the number of sections of grade levels at each one of the groups, the elementary school with 24 facilities has an average of 2,000 students per grade level. Because they have, we said 6.5 sections, and the middle school is only 3 with 6, 7, and 8. So the 6,900 has a total of 2,292 students, and the high school level has 8,000 students with 6 schools. I've got a number that's off on that one. If we go down to 5, we'd be 1,600 students per school. In fact, that was a different number. There's four grade levels. So 4 grade levels into the 8,000 is 2,000 apiece. So what was interesting in some of the other school districts that we've worked in, that number doesn't necessarily stay constant as it goes across the board by grade level. A lot of times there's even a change in the middle, and then it picks back up at the end. But it seems like the number is fairly constant all the way through by grade level across the system. The last sheet that we have is it's a work in progress. We've been collecting some data to
Ms.
show.
LeBou, did you have a question?
Yes.
Yes, sir. It's trivial, but some of the low numbers are yellow and some of them are blue. Is there a differentiation? I didn't see any chart.
The ones that were blue is where there was more of an opportunity.
Okay.
So the yellow was still a low number, but wasn't low enough where it created an opportunity to do one of the collective things that we were talking about.
Okay.
But the yellow is also below the average number. So if you like it, Scott Middle was 619, it's not up to 750, to 800. And if you collect them together, you got 1,200 kids, so we just did it where there was pretty much a clean one that you could make a statement that maybe 6 schools would fit. It doesn't mean there's not more, or you shouldn't do less.
Anyone else have a
Anybody else?
question? Good.
So on the last sheet, again, what we're doing there is trying to format the work that y'all have built. So the column that's kind of colored all the way down is really the total amount. Out of the 234 that was listed in this sheet, y'all have completed $200 million worth of it in the last 10 years. There's still started work that totals up to $13 million, and work that hasn't started yet that was in the program for $7 million. So it's really showing a progression that if we simplify this sheet and look at it with what y'all started with 10 years ago and what y'all have accomplished, I think it's something we need to consider refining and letting the public know what you're really doing without going out for additional taxes and so forth. So it certainly had, I didn't envision that much work had been done when I collected the information and looked at it. So I think it's an opportunity to get the community, get their eyes open to what y'all are really accomplishing with what you're doing. And that's pretty much it in terms of the data. If there's any other questions that y'all want to look at, or the concept. So from here, I think some of this data could be looked at to try to fine-tune the 20-year plan. If the idea from here is if the board members want to look at some of this information and make sure that, because most of y'all weren't there when the planning process went on, for y'all to at least buy into it and understand what was proposed and see if you agree with it. And if not, maybe then the board gets together to decide with the superintendent and the staff what direction y'all want to head in. So that's why the information is brought together, for y'all to be able to think about it and decide what you'd like to do to refine the plan that was set 10 years ago.
Ms. LeBou?
Is the numbers, are those total project costs, or is that just construction costs? I mean, is this everything start to finish, every permit, every?
I think the way it was set up was total cost. Kyle, it's got construction and associated fees to be able to build it if you had a capital improvement program. Is that right? Okay.
Okay.
Ms. Mason?
I just wanted to clarify, this analysis is purely from a financial and logistical place, correct? Like, this has not been, Ms. Trosclair, you have not weighed in on like an educational impact, correct? Okay.
Now, these are actually statements from the master plan. We haven't altered any of the numbers, left them exactly the way that they were, and tried to reformat it in a way that you could recognize what was initially planned when that was put together.
Right. Okay. I mean, at a glance, I think it would be very hard culturally, just with all the traditions in Lafayette, to, you know, combine some of our schools. You know, I would love to hear, you know, what our educators feel,
absolutely.
you know, how this would impact. Because, I mean, even if the numbers make sense, you know, it would be hard to just tell this neighborhood over here, well, you know, your school doesn't exist anymore, you're going over here. So.
Well, it's also, keep in mind, it's not a recommendation at all, as much as just an observation relative to what an ideal size might be for each one of those facilities.
Right, so purely numbers.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay, good.
Just for y'all to look at and make your own decisions of what you think is appropriate. It might be there's none, it might be there's two. There's no recommendation and no decision, strictly the state numbers.
Okay, great. Just wanted to clarify that. Thank
Sure.
you.
Mrs. Santani? Dr. Aguilar?
Yeah, thank you. I guess spreadsheet number 2, the facility condition index that you reference, is that a 2010 number that you're showing?
Yes, we have,
You
we
you haven't recalculated the index.
no, everything is the same. We haven't even gone into the actual condition change over the last 10 years. So when Bill and I started looking at it, to get into that would be a pretty monumental task to get into and do that. So assuming things certainly should have gotten worse unless money was expended on some of them to do improvements, that particular analysis hasn't been done yet.
Right, so there's been about $200 million worth of construction that's taken place in the last 10 years that's
Correct.
not reflected in these numbers.
That's correct.
And this document that Mr. Guidry provided 4 copies of, that's a 2010 document, isn't it?
That's correct.
So it does not reflect the construction that's taken place in the district. It doesn't even reflect the current enrollment numbers in these schools. For example, you mentioned the ideal elementary school would have 538 students,
750.
750, and yet Milton Elementary has 1,200 students today.
Let's just identify the problem.
On spreadsheet 5, you mentioned you broke down the projects into 7 different architectural packages,
Yes.
about $1 million each, and then some architectural, civil projects and electrical projects. Have you shared with maybe Mr. Bordelon the breakdown of the projects that would constitute each package?
We have some other sheets, and we've shared that with the superintendent and Billy in a meeting of a couple of hours just to show it's a way to consolidate. If you have 2 roofs to change that are close to each other, and again, how many packages does Kyle and Ian want to manage if you give out 35 different projects in little bits versus combining some together? So the first thing we did was establish out of the 35 or 40 projects what categories they were in, and then group them by district, just as an observation, do it different than assigning 35 individual projects out. And so it's not even a recommendation, it's just an observation of a way to group projects similarly to maybe be easy to manage from a staffing standpoint.
And Superintendent Trosclair, is that something that maybe you would be bringing to the board, would be maybe for consideration, some packages that maybe we can begin to award so that we can begin to catch up? Because essentially we lost a year of construction waiting on a couple of things. Your very thoughtful analysis of where we are relative to 2010 is helpful, but we're still wrestling with the idea of how do we assign architects and engineers to these projects. That's what precipitated this entire conversation, was how do we award work to be done that's fair and equitable, that the board wants to deal with, and then we begin again dealing with the construction needs for the district.
And I think the way that y'all addressed that was with the architects professional organization and the engineers organization. I think
Correct. So,
took up some
Mr.
information
Guidry,
that Billy and Kyle
right.
furnished them, and
so Mr. Guidry, can you update on the progress made with those 2 different organizations that have been helping guide some of that improvement in that process? Mr. Guidry, where are we with that right now?
We received the second response from the engineering firm, I believe it was this morning or yesterday afternoon. And we had received the position letter from the AIA probably a few days before that. So what the game plan would be to review the responses in detail such that the RFQ document that we sent them for review and the response document, which we refer to as SOQs, review their comments, and make changes that would address those concerns that we feel we can make and still, keep in mind, some of the comments and some of the actions taken by the board in meetings over the year, and come, back to the board, hopefully in March, so that we can maybe, get the board, comments, if there's additional changes that need to be made, we would make them, and hopefully the game plan would be to implement it shortly thereafter, so that we can start on these projects that have been put on hold since, February of, 2020. That's sort of the game plan we have right now. We'll move forward in that direction unless, directed differently by administration or the board.
Mr. Lachele?
Mr. Guidry, as we move forward with this, and I know we're gonna move away from the fishbowl, and I don't think anything thrown into a computer, if it's the same constant names, is gonna work. I think the board needs to have some input, a lot of input, and what we need to start doing as a district is matching the right people with the right projects, with the right references, the right work ethic, and not just continuously, you know, like the day I watched names drawn out of a bowl of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we had 15 projects. Well, number one got 3, number 2 got, finding a better way of doing that. Because just in my district, we've built things and used people that have never built these kind of things before. We used an individual who never built a press box. We should have found someone who had built one and interview individuals who built this specific project. Having a rubric, how many years have you worked for the school system? How many schools have you built here? How much have you done here? How much have you done that? That's great. How many press boxes have you built? How many engineering projects have you worked with on tracks? We used an engineering firm to build tracks that I don't think had ever built tracks before, but there are engineering firms in the area who have built tracks. So we're not putting the right people on the right projects, and that's when you have delays. You have things not being built the way they were supposed to be built, not having communication the way you're supposed to have communication, and maybe overspending. So you're gonna build a project in my district, okay? I want input. I wanna be part of the process. And if you pick someone, I wanna know why. Specifically why. And if not, so we build an elementary school. We're not gonna go get an architectural firm or an engineer or whatever you use on there that's never built one before, okay? We're gonna take a pool. Let's say we take a pool. We're gonna build a new school, okay? You get individuals to apply who have built schools, and you weed them down to the top 5, 4, 3, whatever, through your department, Kyle's department, the superintendent. You rank them fairly and get rid of some of the skewed lines we're using now, okay? Because it is weighted to certain individuals now. Then you put those firms and those packages before the board, and you let the board have input, or you let the board vote on who is used according to rankings. We built wings, I think 9. The process we used for those wings, these architects and firms were ranked, correct?
Correct.
Okay. We built some more wings. Let's say we're building one wing at whatever, Woodville. We're gonna build a wing at Woodville. We're not going to pick Joe out of a hat. What you do is, you look at your grading system from the last time you built the wings, you look at the outcome. Who did a good job, who didn't, who finished on time, who didn't, who went over budget, who didn't. But you look at the basic ranking, and you go from there. You're building one wing. You weed those 9 down to 3, and then you look at it. I think that's the proper way of doing it. You know, we're building an ROTC building. Nobody's ever built an ROTC building around here, I don't guess. I don't even know who the architect is at Acadiana. Who is the architect, Kyle? Do you know? Okay, I don't know the people. I don't know many architects anyway. But, you know, that's maybe not one where you could have used that criteria. But you use someone who's built probably a wing on it or was part of a wing. And slowly but surely you expand the scope of who you use. You don't take Joe Blow, who's been in business for 5 years and never built something, and give him Lafayette High. But you start putting them into the system, you know, basing a rubric of 20 years experience, 10 years experience, 15 years experience. That's great. But, you know, somebody built the new hospital, but they may never have built a school, but they may still be a good firm and should. I think the thing we're asking, people are asking for consideration. They're asking to be a part of the process. And competition is good, very good. But we need input. We need some decisions, because I feel sometimes us as a board will say something or direct something, and it doesn't happen. And I personally work for a living. This is not a full-time job. I shouldn't have to micromanage what goes on, but I will, because some of the things I asked for in the past didn't happen and cost us money that it shouldn't have cost us, with knowledge that was never passed on to me. And that will never happen again in District 5, because my constituents deserve better than that, and they elected me to represent them. So when you come to us in March, make sure it's new, it's fresh, and it involves the rubric that we're going to use, that it's fair across the board, not skewed, because I'm going to pick it apart, and we'll send it back. And in the end, I think when a project is picked or when this is given out, the board needs to have some input. It can't just be done back there, just strictly back there, because in my opinion, doesn't work overall for the big picture of where we're trying to go. And we need to show the public we can do a better job. We really do. That's my input. I can't stay very late tonight. I go to work at 3 o'clock in the morning, so I've got to take care of my day job first. But that's my request. That's my direction that I'd like to see. Fellow board members can chime in. We want a fair and open, transparent process, and we want to expand on who's available to work with us and be part of the interview process, because we're not going to build another press box with somebody that's never built one. And there were problems and have been problems, and information I got off of the track. There's things we could have done different. And I think we need to listen to the professionals we hire, and major decisions that cost money or save money, I think that at least a board member in that district ought to be brought into that conversation. That's why I've asked for a lot of the meetings that will take place, and I'm going to start making them in my district, be held on Wednesdays when I'm off, so I can be a part of it and know what's going on. Because maybe if there's a choice between 1 and 1A, the board, from a standpoint of being the stewards of the taxpayers' money, may want to look into 1A instead of 1. Now, we're not construction experts, civil engineers, chemical, we're none of that. but I think we should have a part in it, and that's my 2 cents. Thank you. Thank you, President.
Ms. LeBeau?
Thank you. So I got my hands on an RFQ that's been drafted, and it says it's prepared by the Lafayette Parish School Board. So somebody called me and said, let me talk to you about your RFQ, and I said, what RFQ? So apparently there's a document out there circulating that says that it's prepared by the Lafayette Parish School Board, which we all know none of us have sat around and drafted anything. And I don't understand why, if this document is there and we're getting information from ACEA and AIA on the document, why can't we concurrently get the comments of the Lafayette Parish School Board? Because I've read through it and I can tell you that I have a lot of issues with this document. And so by not presenting it to us after it was drafted, I just feel like we're delaying what could be a time for us to be consulted and them to be consulted all at once, so that you know, it's just gonna delay the process. I mean, and I don't know if an attorney, I mean, can you tell me who prepared these documents that are circulating? Was it AIA or was it ACA or was it an attorney for the school board?
Was it the document that was distributed to the two associations, Mr.
Yes, yeah, because somebody called me from, that had gotten it from, I guess, an association member who called me and said, I don't understand why the Lafayette Parish School Board wants to do this. And I said, please send it to me because I'd love to see what you're talking about. And so my question is, I just don't understand why we are not in this process at this point, that I'm getting a document from somebody else that says we've drafted it and this is what we are proposing, and people are already objecting to it, and I have no idea what's already in it. And so I guess my problem is now we're not gonna see this until March, and you're gonna get our comments. That'll be another month, right? And then we're just, I guess the process is just being impeded by the fact that we are sitting here in a silo and not being part of the process. And I think I want to echo what Britt said. I think that's kind of what the information, or that's kind of what our issue was with the whole selection process, was we felt like we were putting out an ad, we were getting anybody who had those qualifications to apply to it, and then we were just sticking them in a bowl. We didn't know whether or not they had done a good job for us before, whether or not they'd done a job for us before. So I think our problem is that, and then when we did put out RFQs, we're getting a lot of RFQs with either information that's not helpful to select somebody because it's not relevant to what we really need them for. There's best practices out there I've seen at DOTD or different groups where they put together they do a better job of requesting information from a firm that will tie them to their experience to a project. So, you know, like you said, I mean, if we say, give us your examples of what you've done before, give us 10 projects you've done before. If primarily what they've done is this type of engineering or this type of art, at least we know when we go to select somebody, they have done this type of job. Now, maybe it's not in education, but maybe, like you said, they've done this type of project primarily that we know we can entrust them with. So I just feel like there's different selection criteria. There's different things that we could be moving forward with and selecting and tailoring this to give us more information so that we don't put the wrong person in the wrong seat and we don't end up spending money or delaying the process. But I just feel like we're not being brought into the process at this point, and it's taking us a very long time to get to something which I think at the meeting I asked us to bring AIA in months and months and months ago, and get us all in a room. So I really want to caution everybody that if we don't work together, we're gonna be 3 months down the road and we're not gonna be any closer. So while I appreciate the information we got tonight and I feel like it's great, I feel like we can now springboard from that into, okay, now we see where the issues are, we see where the projects are, we already have projects that are slated. We really need to focus on how we're going to get those projects moving, or we're going to be sitting here at 2021 or 2022 and still not moving along in the process. So I appreciate all the work. I know that y'all are working hard. I know that we've asked you to wear a lot of hats for a lot of different things. We're just, I think, we're just anxious to be part of the process because we know we're coming up on summer and we've got to get some of these things started, initiated, worked out. And I really feel like if you get us involved now, or we start having these meetings now to move forward the process, it's going to go a lot more smoothly. And if you do need assistance, which he's highlighted, if you do need we do need to beef up the planning and facilities, we can do that. But again, that's only going to be kicked down the road if we're not even talking and having these types of workshops and meetings and conversations going on more consistently and quickly. But again, I do appreciate it all. I just think that we need to be part of the process. And the community needs to be part of the process as well.
Dr. Aguilar?
Thank you. I agree with your comments, Ms. LeBou. I think we need to work quickly, but we need to work smart about addressing the needs that we began with almost 8 months ago. So with that said, Ms. Trosclair, could you maybe at the March board meeting provide board members with a list of projects that have been authorized by the board and funding has been secured by the board but not yet started, so that we have a master list and go back and show the fiscal year that project was authorized by the board? I think it would be helpful to do that. And Mr. Poche, I know you worked with the staff with this document 12. I don't see the air conditioning projects for the cafeterias on this list. I know this was something that was authorized while I was superintendent, and it's been almost 2 years that I've been retired, and yet we're not started on a critical air conditioning endeavor to air condition those cafeterias. And we have engineering firms that we have worked with to air condition the middle and high school gymnasiums. So we know that we can find companies, architects, engineering firms to help design those cafeteria air conditioning projects. So I think that needs to be on that list, and maybe from there we can work quickly to evaluate where we are with this RFP and then have the board come to some decision about the mechanism we can use.
By the way, it is on that list, the small projects list with the 4 mechanical categories that are on there. One of those groupings is the cafeterias at the school. So it still addresses the whole list that Kyle has in the small projects. And those groups are on that master list on number 12. And so the superintendent already has the detailed list that Kyle put together that reached this point here. She could send that to you tomorrow.
Ms. Mason?
Wanted to echo what Kate said, and then also in this whole process of, it's so convoluted on what we need and what we get, like with Britt's problems with the press box, Woodville with these small projects, double parking was put in. Who requested the double parking spots, and then who approved them? It's been said that the principal, approved it, but who proposed putting in double parking at a school where it's an election site? So double parking is happening. People are getting in arguments. I mean, some of these things that have been done at schools don't make sense at all. And the approval process, like, I want to have a say. If you're going to put in double parking at my school where even my siblings went there and traditions were paved over the front circle, so you have to be assigned a spot now by a teacher, and if that teacher has to leave, they have to call their buddy to come pull out. And you should see it on election day. I mean, these kind of projects are embarrassing to our public, and I don't understand how you could blame a principal for approving that when it was proposed to her in the first place. There has to be a checks and balances for all of the things that we're building at our schools. Additionally, at Woodville, over 25 lights were put in on the back side of the school. So at night, when you drive by, it's all lit up. What do those lights serve? I mean, there's no parking even on that side of the school. So some of the things that I see being put in, I don't understand the approval process. I also get feedback from education experts in building who say we aren't even building our schools to be conducive learning environments. Why aren't we consulting the expert people on who build great schools? I want us to be striving to build the best schools we can with the budget we have. And I'm very frustrated with the process, and I just wanted to share that.
Mr. Lachele?
One time, Madam President, I'm gonna have to go. Kate, I will say you put it better than I did. You worded a lot better than I do. Part of the plan, Dr. Aguilar, I like the way Mr. Poche broke up the small projects and condensed them. Much easier to manage. Less people involved. We can get the right people in place. We have a budget meeting, if I'm not mistaken, on the 23rd. Maybe a packet or information or a preliminary can be given to us. Is that possible? Because that's a budget. Is that a budget workshop, a budget hearing? Could we have a line to where we could get some of this information you're talking about on the 23rd, so that we're a little versed on it when we do get to the board meeting? And if any board members have any concerns or any input, deletions, whatever, we can get with you in that 10-day time frame. Would that be possible, Mr. Guidry?
And the information you're referring to is basically what we're going to be bringing in March, but you would see it a little earlier. I just want to make sure.
Yes, sir. We would definitely do our best to do that. If you can, it makes it easier. And I understand that the moving forward with this and getting the projects done. I'm pleased with what was presented tonight. We do have to have a plan. You know, if you fail to plan, you just assume plan to fail. I know the part of the selection process was not part of Mr. Poche's. He was not tasked with that. We actually removed that responsibility from him the night that we hired him as a consultant. So that was not him to bring that to us tonight or in the past 6 months. That wasn't what he was tasked to do. This was just a consulting thing that he was hired to do, which I'm pleased with, and have gotten good information. And I plan on using the information he gave me in my district to move forward. I think we have a better vision. I was part of the master plan facility in 2010. Very limited because of the way they did it. I had military drill a couple times. They had meetings, but I did participate as much as I could. But to get started on the small projects, if we can get down to the selection process, and I want to see that process come to the board. I agree with everything my fellow board members have said tonight, and I'll probably agree with everything they say, but I will have to call it an evening. Thank you, and I do apologize for having to go.
Thank you, Mr. Lachele. Mr. Broussard?
I was under the impression that the Maintenance and Transportation Committee would have some input or some insight on what we do. I was also under the impression that we would create some sort of category that small projects be given to certain groups who can handle it. Not everybody in the area has the money for the bonding and insurance to build a wing or to build a building. So I was hoping that we create a small project group for those who cannot or does not have the facilities to do the large projects. In every project that is done, I was also under the impression that it would come to the board and have a grading system. You bid $100,000 for it, and at the end of the job is $200,000. And that would weigh into effect as to if you're going to get consideration for the next job. Now, I know there's something they said in there that we cannot turn your bid away, but I think this board should have some say-so on how you completed that job, who you hired for the job. Did you go over budget? Is the job satisfactory to everyone, including us, and includes the people at the school or wherever you're building it at? So I would ask that each project that is done for each board member's school or district, that it would go to them and it would wind up with the committee to do a grading system, because we cannot continue to let someone build a wing or a building and does not do a good job and come back and stick it to us again. If every time you're doing a job, you need additional fund, well, you're not really qualified to work for us. So I would ask not to micromanage, but to, if we're gonna create some small jobs, that we get a group of people that can do that, separate from building the wings and building the building and building the gym and air conditioning 12 gyms. We gotta get some everybody, as much people as we can involved in spending our money. We gotta be a good steward of our taxpayers' money. So we gotta get as many people involved, and those who wanna do a good job. You cannot grow into a multi-million-dollar company if no one gives you an opportunity to show what you can do. And we should be showing, should be giving them an opportunity to show what they can do. So what I would ask, that I know we've got a lot of projects on the table, and I would ask that once it's completed, that whatever district is in, that board member weigh into it and winds up on the desk of the committee to get it somewhat of a grading system, not a complicated system, but something simple. And we all are not engineers and architects, carpenters, plumbers, electricians, and what, but we have a keen eyesight on what should look like when it's all said and done. So if it's not done in good taste, we get the blame for it. And we should have some weigh in on if this person should get another job with us because what he did or did not do. That's my.
Mr. Guidry?
Yes, I've heard the comments, and have made notes of them, and we're going to do our best to address them. Just a little bit of history as to how we got to where we are at this point in time, I'll go back and replay the tape of the meetings, but my understanding to go as to small capital projects, the issue was, first of all, it wasn't formalized, wasn't in writing. Second of all, we had no guidelines, written guidelines of well, what happens if there's a firm that we don't know about, what kind of work they can do, or we know that they haven't performed at a certain level, acceptable level. How do we address those so that they're not included in the assignment of projects? Those were some concerns. What happens if we have a new firm? How do they get their foot in the door, without awarding them one of our larger projects? And so that understanding, plus the fact that the document that was distributed to the Architectural Association and the Engineering Association is the RFQ document that has basically been vetted for probably the last 5 years. The previous board, and look, realizing that the membership of the board has changed, but the last 5 years of coming to the board with an RFQ going through the process. We submit the RFQ on the front end, looking for comments. It comes back. When we evaluate it, we didn't particularly like this evaluation criteria, taking that in mind, making that change, redoing the whole process again, sometimes 2 and 3 times, a considerable amount of effort. 5 years of that has gone into this document. And so when we went into the process and provided it to both associations, we felt that we had the document that had basically been fine-tuned based on the wishes of the board, previous board, I understand, some of them with an overlap with some of the board members, so that it was reflective of basically what we have heard over the past 5 years. We've had some concerns about some of the smaller firms aren't included. We've put stipulations. We've allowed for if a new firm comes in, then they only qualify for projects under a certain dollar amount, and we direct assign it. By we, the board, a recommendation from staff, the board approves it or or gives us who they would like to direct assign it to. That's a piece there. And then also incorporating an evaluation process so that for the larger projects and for the firms that have been doing business for the school district for some years now, there would be an evaluation for those that maybe the project didn't come in over under budget, wasn't completed on time, issues with the relationship with the contractor, not responding to the contractor on a timely basis. Therefore, it was an issue for the contractor to try to maybe even come in earlier or at a lesser cost on the project. So all of that's in there. All of that's reflected in there. So I understand the concern about maybe the specific board members that we have on the board at this point in time not having had a chance to maybe basically be a part of that process. But again, I think we're going to find that that process will take maybe more than a couple of 3 months, because as I mentioned, what we presented was an accumulation of 5 years of going to the board and determining, well, this particular criteria needs to move in this direction or be pulled off or be replaced with this. All of that's taking place, and that was our starting point. It was not something that we put together. It was something that has evolved over the past 5 years. Now, as it went through the process, with AIA and the Engineering Association, I found the comments were very interesting. We had some comments that indicated, well, why are we not allowed to put the jobs that we performed for the Lafayette Parish school system? Why isn't it in there? Well, that's because we were told through the RFQ process by the board at that time to remove it, because they felt that it eliminated those school districts that had, those firms that had not done projects for us. So that's why it's not on there. In one of the comments from the association, and I understand why they put it on there, and we had that discussion, well, why are they not allowed to put those projects? It would just seem to be logical that y'all would better be able to adjudicate or decide what kind of work they do if you have the projects that they've done for you as opposed to another school district. So those were some of the things that we dealt with. Why isn't this in there? Well, it was in there. It got removed over the years, and look, with proper justification. The concern that by putting projects they had done for us, it allowed administration to steer the evaluation in a certain direction based on one or two individuals' opinion of the type of quality of service they provided was one of the reasons that was pulled off. So I'm sharing all of this and in no way it should indicate that we're not going to move forward with addressing the concerns that were mentioned tonight. But in all honesty, we thought, or I thought, I may not speak for anyone else, that we were dead on in terms of what we had been asked to do when we first presented last February. In terms of the concerns, the comments that were made, we have addressed every one of those comments that were made during that meeting. So with all of that said, we can come with the early, a few days early, with the changes that we would reflect based on the comments from AIA and ASEC, only if they don't contradict what we've already been through with that 5-year process. Some of them we already know that it has not been acceptable to the board as a whole, and we've explained it. But we can come with that, and then at that point ask this board, to comment on the criteria, what to be included in it, how many points to be assigned, that kind of thing. So I appreciate the time that you have allowed me to comment, and the only reason I chose to do so is the amount of work that has gone into this process, the integrity of the way we approached it, meaning we thought we were right, we were doing exactly what we were asked to do. Now, with the clarification we received this evening, I have no problems moving in a slightly different direction. I'm disappointed that it'll delay the process, by some time period, but I'm only disappointed in the delay. I'm not disappointed in the fact that we may have to change a good portion of what we've done, because if that's what it takes to make the board member or majority of the board members feel comfortable with the process, then we're willing to do it. So my disappointment is just a slight delay, but I don't think it was due to our not responding to the request. I think it was probably due to there was a little bit more behind the request that we didn't recognize it, we didn't hear it previously at the meeting in February, and with all that, I'll stop at that point, and I hope all of you realize that we'll move in a direction and address the comments that you will make as we move through the process. It may delay it another month or two, who knows, but I think it's worth it if when we're done, you all are satisfied with that project. So thanks for the allowing me to basically give you the history of how we got to the point of the document that got distributed. Thank you.
Mr. Broussard?
Mr. Guidry, I understand what you just said, all what you said, and all the work that it took to get to where we're at. I do not want to reinvent the wheel. That's not my intentions. My intention, and I understand you're not putting, how much work have you done for the Lafayette Parish School Board, because it may give them an edge over someone else. I understand that. But my whole thing is, did you do a quality job for what we gave you in return? That's my whole thing. You know, and it's a grading system. As far as what qualification you have, I think the numbers, your license speak for itself. But my concern is, did the money we pay you, or we started off with, is it equal to the value that we've got? That's my concern. We've got many projects. Almost every school in the parish got something going on. It'd be difficult for us to go down there and say it, this is wrong or this is right, because most of us don't have that keen eye. But my main concern is, did we get the value that we paid for? That was my concern.
Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Sasha?
Mr. Poche, question for you. On page 2, what is the numerical indicators when it says replace 1.6 and replace 2.7? What is that numerical indicator? Phases? Okay. Yeah, that's the phases?
That'd be my understanding.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Would you say that the FCI would still hold up? Granted, this is 2010, and I know some of these we've actually worked on. Some of these schools are no longer in existence. Would you say that these would still hold true in 2020?
I would think the ones that haven't been worked on, that the situation's probably working.
A little worse, okay. I got you. Just real quick, just random question. Have we worked on Catherine Drexel or S.J. Montgomery? Do we? Yeah. Okay, not Montgomery, okay. Leo Judy's, does anybody know?
They've had a new library, a new administrative wing.
Okay. Okay, all right, I got you, all right. Let's see. 2021, okay. Well, I guess the page that's labeled 11. Where there's the indicator of -1 school, that's the particular zones, for instance, at Acadiana High School, that someone would suggest -1 school? Is that a suggestion?
It's really, none of them are a specific suggestion. That's why I even went by, if you look back at the elementary schools, we got 24 campuses
Okay,
and 14,000 students, so you got 606 students per campus. That is below the 750 average number,
okay,
where you could actually remove 2 schools and still only be at 660 students per campus. So it's just an indicator just to show if 750 is the ideal amount.
gotcha.
You have breathing room to move between them. None of that was intended to be a specific
Right,
recommendation
right.
at all.
It just happens to, not a recommendation, but there happens to be some schools with numbers that you could combine.
That's correct.
Okay, and the this is a notion I had never thought about before, so I appreciate it. I just want to be clear that for every school that we would eliminate, it would save us $1 million of recurring revenue. About,
Well, if you're combining them,
right,
then your utilities and maintenance are gonna be about $500,000.
okay,
And your administrative staffing will be about $500,000.
Okay.
Those are round numbers depending on the size of the schools, but it's not gonna be the ranges are gonna be give or take 100,000.
Okay.
You know, it's not gonna be,
What was utilities and maintenance, about 500,000, you said?
right,
Okay.
and I'm talking
What was the
about,
other number? Okay,
you know,
450,000.
when you look at, principal, assistant
administration?
principal, librarian, counselors, social
Okay.
workers, you know,
Gotcha.
if-
Okay, what happens to those folks if, let's say, on a random whim, that even though that's something no one has thought about before with us, that this gains traction and 3 months from now we decide to consolidate 2 schools, what happens to those employees?
So, ultimately, of course, you'd have the assistant principals, depending on the size of the school, there may not be any change there.
Okay.
Because with the increase of the school, you may need
Right,
either
more assistant
both or
principals.
3. So you're probably talking about, maybe the librarian, you may be talking about the counselor, that could change, you might need 2, depending on the size.
Okay,
But you would look to, absorb them through attrition.
okay,
Now, you may have an administrator, who would have to go to another school who has an opening for an administrator, right?
okay,
So in that regard, it's a change, and in the unlikely event it can't be absorbed through attrition, then you may have someone who's in an administrative position that may have to go back into the classroom
okay.
until an administrative position opens up again that they can have.
Does that person keep their salary while they're teaching, that principal salary?
That piece,
And I'm gonna stop with that, cause I'm going too
No,
far, I'm just curious.
I can't answer only because I don't know the answer. I think they would probably, they would probably go to the, if it's a teaching slot, then they would be paid as a teacher.
That's correct.
Okay, gotcha, okay. The possible zones, Acadiana High School zone, Northside High School zone, that's the 2 places I see -1 school, but I know we're going to 40, well, a suggestion or just a thought exercise that 48 to 42. What's the other, is it the areas of blue, Acadia Middle and Cancro Middle? I'm trying to find the other places where you could decrease. I see the blue, but is there other areas? Because I see the brackets of -1 school for Acadiana High, -1 for Northside.
Some of that comes with looking at the overall number in
Okay.
the whole, in the whole section. So in the middle schools, where you had, 11 schools, if you drop it to 9, you're still at 760 as an average for the middle schools,
Okay,
when 850 is the general average that you can utilize. So again, part of it was a guide of looking at all of them collectively. And the
Okay.
other one would have been, like in the Carencro zone, one of the schools was 458 and 610. There's almost enough between those 2 to make up one middle school, at a count of between 700 and 1,000.
okay,
So just use an example. It doesn't mean that's the specific school, and the demographics can change, by reassigning feeders to those schools to increase at that location if that facility has space in it. So you really have to look at more than that. Some of these might have room for expansion, additional students, without doing anything to them. Burke Elementary might be one of those that has some capacity to bring students into it without doing anything. And do you look at that as an advantage in shuffling around? But
gotcha.
from what I saw in the master plan and the comments from the public, they really wanted to be very careful to not impact redistricting and to work within the district and the neighborhoods where the schools were at.
Okay. So, what another option or a possibility, and I guess I know the answer to this already, but could it be combining a middle school to, the goal is 1,500 for a high school? Or is it 1,500? So combining a middle school with a high school to make another 6 through 12? And that would save us the same savings, basically, so we could use those funds at a later point. Like basically combining Paulboro Middle with Northside High School?
That is something we actually had a discussion on.
Okay.
If it made sense to not have them be below size and get up to that size, but then you're mixing,
Yeah.
if you can do it on one campus and keep it separate. And
Yeah.
I'll give an example we did in St. Martin Parish. We had an elementary school that was in a very depressed and troubled area.
Right.
And they didn't want the kids going there. There was some actual deaths that occurred and so forth with some of the school
Yeah,
kids.
we have STEM.
So we
have-
brought it and merged it with Robridge Primary School. It had an adequately sized campus.
Okay,
We expanded the existing facilities and created 2 campuses and spent about $7 million instead of building a brand-new elementary school that might have cost $20 million.
$20 million, okay.
And so that was, again, coupling up 2 smaller schools and on a campus that could handle it, and ended up saving about $16 million with that solution.
Okay.
So there's different ways to do it.
Okay, and Paulboro and Northside. Those are 2 campuses that are really close together, really close. And Northside doesn't have a true feeder anymore once Moss closed. You can actually eliminate a program at a high school that could now transition into Northside. I know a really good program at Paulboro. I was in it. Ms. LeBou is asking about La Rosen Prep, the 283. How did we arrive at the 283 number? Was that an average that we saw at some point? She's curious as to the number 283. An average.
Thank you.
Okay. And lastly, really quickly, I think I asked Justin this once, and he had a really direct answer. I wanted to ask you guys, the old way of going about things as far as, so we've got an allocated project, let's say a wing. We allocate $10 million. We advertise that. Obviously, if I'm an architect, and it's not to knock any architects that are in the room, if I'm gonna bid and I know the number, I'm gonna try and get as close to it, but yet still wanna make sure I'm coming as low as possible to try and get it. Low man wins almost most of the time. Is there any way that we could eventually get to a point where we advertise for the size and the scope of a project, and then folks come to us and say, hey, that new wing at Paulboro Middle, we can certainly build that for you, and you wanted this many square feet and this many classrooms, we can do it for $6 million. Now granted, we knew we wanted to build it for, we were gonna allocate 10 million, but is there any possible way we could get to that point where you don't have to say, now granted, I know we have to, excuse me guys, I have a sore throat. I know we have to allocate money and find a funding mechanism and whatnot, and that's how we go about it, but is there any way we could eventually get to that, or is that just an impossible measure? Where you don't say what your final number is that you're willing to go to, so we could get folks bidding it fairly. I mean, they're doing it fairly. Go ahead, Kyle, I'm sorry.
So,
Mr. Bartolone?
so the architects don't bid on the project.
Okay,
When we choose an architect, we go through a selection process where they submit RFQs, they're evaluated, the top 3 get oral interviews with the same evaluation committee, recommendation is made to the superintendent and the board. The architects then meet with us, they find out how much money we have budgeted, and then they find out what we want to accomplish, how many classrooms, how many restrooms, how many auxiliary spaces, etc. And they know that there's only a certain amount of money to achieve that.
okay,
Now, if they foresee that there's only half of the money there, then what, if our hunger is bigger than our stomach,
uh-huh,
then they'll tell us that. They'll say, you don't have enough money, you need more money.
I got you.
Or vice versa, you know, they'll come back and along the way, during the design process, they come up with design estimates of probable cost based on the things that we are asking them to design into the project. Now, once the construction documents are completed and it goes out for bids, we have no control over what the contractors who are going to bid on the work, we have no control over what they are going to turn in as a bid.
Okay. So
We
let me-
are obligated.
Let me ask you this, Kyle. I understand, I don't wanna go too far off on a tangent, cause I'm getting more information than I actually like. Is there any way that we could get to, I understood the first 2-3 points, and then once you get to the point of, so they find out how much that we're willing to spend, is there any way that we could get to a point where, for instance, with roofing and everything that I do, no one tells me, hey, I got about 10 grand, and then I tell them how much it costs. I go look at the project and see, oh, this is what you wanna fix, this is what you wanna recreate or do, then is there no way we could eventually get to that point where the contractor and the architect, okay, they wanna build a new wing, and they want it to be 10,000 square feet, 20,000, okay, they wanted 2 stories, yeah, they understand the scope of the project, then they come and bid said project, so we can stop getting to the point where people tax us to the point of our full allocation. There's just no way possible. It's just a random childish thought.
I'm not quite sure how to answer your question, but I've seen things happen both ways.
Okay.
Probably the most recent one is BO Elementary School. The architects designed the brand new school just the way we wanted it,
Okay,
with all the input from everybody in this building.
okay,
They told us we needed $21 million. Fortunately, we had the money. We had borrowed $25 million, I believe it was. Architect said we needed $21 million. The price on bid day came in at like $17.9 million.
okay,
We were amazed. We were glad.
right,
Very glad. Okay? But as you well know from projects I've brought
Yeah.
to the board, we've set a budget, and on bid day, the numbers came in higher than what we expected. Now, we are obligated by state law that we cannot put out a project unless we have the money in the budget, and that has to be based on the architect or engineer's estimate of probable cost before we put it out for budget.
Okay.
So,
Gotcha.
and I do this on every project, when the architect says, or the engineer says the plans are done, I say, update your estimate of probable cost. If they tell me, okay, I believe this project's gonna come in at $1.5 million, and if I have $1.6 million in my construction budget, I say, okay, let's put it out for bids. But again, we have no control over the contractor's prices. If on bid day, the lowest price comes in at $2 million, that is something beyond the architect's control, it's beyond my control. We have 2 choices. We can either put more money in the budget and move forward, or we can reject all the bids,
Okay.
go back to the drawing board and start chopping scope of work out of the project to reduce it down.
gotcha.
But we didn't put it out for bids because, according to the architect or engineer, they felt we had enough money in the budget to put it out for bids.
Okay, I think this is it. We want to thank Mr. Guidry, Mr. Poche for your presentation. We really appreciate you listening to our concerns, and thank you for bringing us to the road down memory lane to bring us up to date. Thank you very much. So this will conclude our meeting. Everyone have a nice evening. Thank you.